Every human person wants to express himself or herself through something, through art, through dance, through any kind of forms. We are all people of expression. Welcome. Welcome to Wordnet Productions, and I'm Father Sony Sebastian. Today, for our interview at the studio, we have a very important personality, a professor of theology at LMU, Los Angeles, Loyola Marymount University, Los Angeles. She is Cecilia Gonzalez Andrieu, who has a doctorate from the Graduate Theological Union Berkeley, and she's going to share with us today on the aesthetics of theology, or theology of aesthetics. I don't know whichever way, but she's going to correct that, by the way. Welcome, Cecilia. Welcome to Wordnet.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yes, it's a confusing term, so what we use is theological aesthetics.
Theological aesthetics. Now, without waiting and without getting into anything else, what is this theological aesthetics?
So the way we can think about it is that it functions in two ways. So how does our sensory experience, especially of beauty and of beauty's absence, and that's something that's very important, inform the ways we think about and speak about God. So how is it theological, right? And then on the other side, so that's our experience, how we are experiencing the world through our senses. On the flip side is then how do things made for our senses, like painting, like dance, like music, like sacred spaces, how do these speak of God? How do these point toward God? How are they speaking theologically? So it's a complicated name, but I think it's one of the most ancient things that Christians have known how to do and have instinctively done. And so we're really just kind of putting, language and things to write in books to something that we have done for our entire history.
Yeah. Now, I like the way you said, Cecilia, senses, sensory perception, if I can use the word perception, is more theological and philosophical. So also you said ancient.
Ancient, yeah.
Because as I believe, every human person has a tendency to look up to something that is bigger or beyond himself or herself. And any art form becomes an expression of that reality or that entity which is beyond him, bigger than him. Do you agree with me with that?
What we find is that the most ancient things that tell us that human beings were somewhere are these expressions that you're talking about, that, cave paintings or small statues, right? Yeah. That people didn't make these as decorations. They made them to memorialize, or maybe to initiate, or to bring about experiences of a transcendent other and a transcendent universe, a cosmic, right? So theological aesthetics in that sense is extraordinarily interreligious and expansive, because we find that human beings in different religious communities and different religious ways, including our ancient forebears in the caves, were doing this, and were expressing themselves in these particular ways. So part of my work has been to look at what could we see across all of these different times and across all of these different communities globally that speak to our senses and that show us that it's about something bigger than decoration.
I want to come to, I want to connect that with probably the tribal or the aboriginal art forms that we have across the world. But before that, I also would like you to share something about the development and what has happened in Christianity. I don't want to specify Catholicism. In Christianity specifically, because we have, as I understand, there was iconography, and prior to iconography, even there used to be, as you said, the cave paintings. I visited a few of the catacombs in Rome, and I'm told that some of the paintings found in the catacombs were means to catechize people at that time. Is that true?
Yes, and in other words, I think that most of what we have thought of, well, this is a way to pass along the faith, to catechize people who were largely illiterate, who could not be reading, the texts, etc. That was going on. But also they were leaving marks of themselves, of their time, of what mattered to them, of what some of the issues they were grappling with were. So they have a deeper thing going on than just, here's this moment in the gospel, or here's this, and we want to just leave you that. Like we have some very ancient frescoes in catacombs of the visit of the three kings, for instance, right? But it's presented in a particular way, or they might be presented in different ways that tell us different things, right? They may be like very simply dressed and moving. That's telling us one thing. Or they may be very opulently dressed and kneeling before the child. That tells us a different thing, right? Now they're both passing along this story of the visit of the three magi, but they're giving us a theological interpretation already in the way that they are sharing it with their communities and what they want to highlight and what the point that they want to make. And so that's the thing that then, professors like me try to teach our students to be able to do. How do you read this at these multiple levels so that we can bring in what the communities were saying?
I remember visiting the Domitilla catacomb in Rome, and they say that there is a painting of the Last Supper where you have Jesus in the middle and the disciples, all 12 of them, sitting either side. And I remember somebody mentioning that that probably was kind of the prototype used by Da Vinci when he made later on the Last Supper, the famous Da Vinci's Last Supper. So what I like you to explain to our audience is the gradual movement in art and the expression of our belief system and faith that has taken place in Christianity. I mentioned about iconography. I don't know if iconography could be dated back even beyond Vatican II or the picture Renaissance time. Can you explain some of those things?
Well, the making of images, which is what we mean by iconography, right? Has been a contested space, a difficult space within the Christian tradition, which sometimes has caused big fights and sometimes has had painful outcomes. So, for instance, we begin, as you were saying, right, with these spaces where the early Christians were gathering and with this desire to leave behind these images to pass along to those who would come visit, to help worship, to help put us in a space like that. That, you know, we kind of begin there. It's very interesting to notice that our first images are never of the crucifixion. They're never the cross. That comes much later. Why is that? Well, if you're living in a place where crucifixion is an actual thing that you're seeing all the time, and it's horrific, why would you memorialize that, right? So they're not. The earliest images we have of Jesus are of him as the Good Shepherd.
Oh, really?
Yes, and there's a second reason for that. So first, it's because crucifixion's horrifying. And second, because you could surreptitiously have an image of a shepherd with a lamb in your house and not be marked as a Christian who could get in trouble because, hey, everybody had images of shepherds in their houses. So that was a way to kind of cloak it, the same thing that we have with the making of the fish, which is also one of our earliest images. It was a code, right? So we have these codes. We have the anchor, which of course is referring to, Christ as the anchor of our life, but it's referring to the work of the disciples. In fishing, right? Both of those things, and to then all of the scripture references to that. So the community starts developing, shorthand kind of forms. The cross will come much later, and it's part of a gradual theological development, right? So very often the artwork is going to be reflecting what is happening theologically. Now, when we get to the Middle Ages, so we're fast forwarding like
I know.
lot.
Yes, of course.
We have a particularly insightful abbot by the name of Abbot Suger, and he's in the region which is now France. And he starts thinking that if God and the heavenly realm is so beautiful, and God is the one that requires all of our most beautiful gifts to God, because those are given to us by God, then our worship needs to be like that. So he writes these beautiful things about that. Everybody on the altar should be dressed in the finest linens, because the angels are above doing that. And so the theological understanding that as we are having a liturgy, it is also happening in heaven.
Amen.
To him said, well, then we got to bring heaven to us and make it visible. So he is the first one that really has this thought of making the stained glass windows. And the stained glass windows are at first just blue, to let in the light of heaven and create heaven for us. And so we get this term called anagogy, which is different.
Say that word again.
Anagogy.
Anagogy.
G-O-G-Y, rather than analogy.
Analogy.
Right, and it's not analogy. It's not saying, oh, this is like heaven, right? It's anagogy, which is we are lifting ourselves to heaven. We are rising up so that we can be with the angels as the sacrifice of the Mass is happening. So he begins these incredible works, and he really is behind the building of like the first great cathedral. And then the idea comes around, which you alluded to, of, well, now we have all of these people who can't read, but they are Christian. How do we teach them about the gospel stories in the artwork? And how do we make our sacred spaces to really feel like sacred, but also to teach us how to be church, right? And so then it becomes this relationship, right, between the believing community and their particularity, right? Where are they? Who are they? What do they need? And what the sacred space is going to be like, right? Now, when we get to the Reformation, so fast forwarding
Yes.
a lot, one of the big fights, right, is around all of these trappings that have just kind of grown around the faith, some of which become problematic because they're saying, you know, that we need all of these intermediaries to get to God, right? And people are paying for indulgences, and people are paying lots of money to have their tomb be near the altar because
Yeah,
I'll get to heaven
closer
earlier
and faster.
And right, and so if we go to Europe and look at those cathedrals, that's what
yes.
we're going to see, right? The king and the queen, like they're super close
Yeah.
to the altar.
Well,
And
that you find even in Rome a lot.
yes, right? And so it was a way to assert we are resisting and fighting with Rome. We are now separating ourselves as being people of the book, of the scripture, and not of all these trappings.
Cecilia, we're going to, this is very interesting. It's getting more and more interesting, at least to me, because I like art forms, by the way. And every time I have gone to Rome, gone into Sistine Chapel, especially to, you know, St. Peter's, walked there, I don't know how many times, and I also like to go and sit, even architectural expression of faith, you know, looking at St. Peter's. And the one of the best thing that I like is to go sit by one of those huge gigantic pillar and watch people walk by. But we're going to get into a few more of those things, but we're going to take a short break. I'm sure you're enjoying this beautiful discussion, and Cecilia is giving more than what I think we can take in this short period of time. But don't go away. She has got a lot more to share with us. Stay.
Do you want to fall in love with God? I'm sure we all want to. The book of Psalms contains the directions. Thousands of years ago, people like you and me talked to God out of the depths of their hearts, revealing an intimate love. Psalms are the expression of the faith in God by people around 3,000 years ago. God was not a mere abstract creator, but was present, involved, and a real person of power and emotions. Now, when we read or listen to the Psalms, we can know the intensity of this love. Entering into the influence of the Psalms, we can find a path to know and love God. To know more about the Psalms, you should get a copy of Father Mike Manning's booklet, The Psalms. It will help you to understand the 150 Psalms better as he has categorized them. He uses the technique of acts: adoration, contrition, thanksgiving, and supplication. Get your copy today and know the categories. Learn to pray with the Psalms.
Call the number on the screen or email us. You can also get it through our website. Get your copy today.
Welcome back. We're having this beautiful discussion with Cecilia Gonzalez Andrieu, who is the professor of theology at LMU Los Angeles. And in the last segment, we spoke about, and Cecilia shared with us about the development of art forms and aesthetics. So also how it became an expression of people's faith as well as even their disagreement with a particular system. Cecilia, you know, when in my little travels around the world in different countries, and especially in Rome, walking and observing some of the beautiful expressions of Christianity and its development through the innumerable or churches and paintings there, I have found that there has been a change taking place. Now, when I say change, not only there, all over the world, people adapt and express their faith using their own cultural expressions. When I say that, what I'm meaning, at least I'm trying to explain it to you, is let's say the apparitions of the Blessed Mother. She probably is the only one who has expressed or presented herself, not always like a let's say a woman from the Middle East. When she showed herself in Africa, she showed herself as an African woman. When it was in Europe, it was a European. When it was in India, when she was an Indian. When it was in Mexico, it was a Hispanic person. And the expression of that also through art forms have been very much similar to that. Do you think it is cultural, and is it because we want to express ourselves the way we are?
Well, this is kind of what we call enculturation, right? That a faith enters a particular community's culture and starts speaking the faith in the ways of that culture, right? And that's really something that the Second Vatican Council says, okay, let's stop equating Christianity with the European expressions that are cultural, and let's open all of that up so that we can have the ways people sing, the way people make their art, we can have it all speak with and from them, right? It's this dialogue. I mean, that's what art is actually. It's a dialogue between a maker and their community and those who are receiving it and their community, right? So for this dialogue to happen, right, it needs to really speak in your own language and with your own images and with your own sounds and all that. And so that was one of the great breakthroughs of the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, which then started flowering all over the world and gives us this richness. Now, on the other side of that, we also have popular religion. And popular religion develops kind of alongside this much before the Second Vatican Council, without needing the permission of anyone, but as expressive of particular communities, and very often very poor communities or marginalized communities, of their faith traditions and how they were expressing those, right? So we have things all over the world that are very unique to a community and that sometimes are very ritualized by the community, which we would say, you know, this is actually like almost liturgical, but it is completely theirs. Very often, if not all times, it's lay-led. It comes out of the lay community, and it's passed along generation to generation. And it's a very rich source for us to then look at and say, look at this popular religious practice that's coming out of Africa or India or China, wherever it's coming from. Let's look at that and let's say, what's it saying about Christ? What's it saying about God? What's it saying about the Spirit? And that's where we get this beautiful global variety of Catholic Christianity all over the world that we should see as like an extraordinary gift. Experiences of beauty are always, they're not an end in themselves, they're always pointing toward the source of beauty. And the source of beauty and the source of our sense that something is beautiful, our recognition of it is in God. right? How do we explain that all of us
I
will
know.
sit in front of a sunset, as you're saying, all of us, all over the world, in every culture, and experience that as beautiful wherever we are, right? There's something inherently kind of wired into human beings that recognizing the beautiful gives us life and allows us also to protect life, to protect that source of beauty, in the sense, the planet, right? Which is also a very big priority for Pope Francis.
Yes.
At the same time, right, if beauty is always pointing to God as the source of all beauty, we also have to cultivate ourselves to recognize the absence of beauty. So we go to that same beach you're pointing to, but it's full of trash. And at that point, right, our heart needs to break. We need to recognize this is not God's will, and this is where history comes in, right? This is not what God wants for God's creation or for us, because creation is God's gift. And then it moves us into ethical action. We need to make this not be this way. It should not be destroyed. It should not be dirty. We should not be exploiting our planet or other human beings.
Si.
Huh?
Laudato Si.
Laudato Si, right? Laudato Si is an amazing document of it. It really has a theological aesthetics underpinning. I think Pope Francis uses the word beauty 61 times in it. And so that's an authoritative document of the Church that tells us, recognize beauty when it's present, recognize the absence of beauty, and have that break your heart so that you want to restore beauty.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming down and spending your time and sharing this vast knowledge of yours. And I know you have only shared just a drop from that. We would still try to get more of it later. And I'm sure all of you enjoyed listening to Cecilia about this beautiful aspect of the theological aesthetics and expression of a personal expression of God experience. Thank you so much for being with us. If you liked our show, please click on that bell button as well as the subscribe on the YouTube when you watch. So also spread word about this ministry to all the people, to everyone that you meet, and support the ministry as well the best way you can, and continue to pray for one another. Take care.